everyone. So yes, as Nancy just said, whereas we usually focus on consumer topics like the truth about mums, the truth about wellness, the truth about beauty, when my team and I heard that we were going to be doing the truth about advertising, we were quite intimidated by the subject matter, particularly when we heard we were going to be presenting it to an industry audience. But actually, when we put together the methodology and we started to look at the potential for what we could actually do, there we go. Ooh. Okay, in terms of the methodology, we realized we could actually have quite a lot of fun with this because we went to an external audience. So we interviewed 1,000 Americans online. It's a representative survey in terms of age, gender, and ethnicity, and we had soft quotas on social grade as well. But then in partnership with the 4As, we also had the opportunity to send out an industry survey, which was completed by 478 people who actually work in advertising. And then we went and did some one-on-one interviews with people in different agencies. We filmed those interviews, and I'm going to be playing some clips from those interviews in the presentation. And then finally, we went down to Madison Avenue, and we actually stopped people on the street, and we asked them how they feel about people who worked in advertising. And I think we found some pretty interesting things. So these are the chapters I'm going to be talking you through today. So first of all, chapter 1 is Sad Man in the Mirror, and this is how we feel about ourselves as an industry. Then on to chapter 2, which is how the rest of the world sees advertising, or sorry, not the world, America. So this is America on advertising. And then finally, the sort of concluding chapter, which we've called Pride and Persecution. Okay, so starting off with Sad Man in the Mirror. So during the interviews that we did with people, we asked them the question, how do you think the rest of the world sees people who work in advertising? What words might the rest of the world use to describe us? Okay, so I'm just going to play you a clip, and you can see some of the words that came out of our interviews with industry people.
If the general public were to describe people that work in advertising, I think they'd think we're a little bit cunning.
Charlatans would be one.
Huckster, fast-talking.
Sellout, perhaps.
Liar.
Egocentric.
Manipulators.
Superficial.
Greedy, dishonest, and manipulative.
Okay. So it's not good. It's not good. We don't think that the outside world has a particularly favorable view of us in the industry. We also had some visual questions in the survey. So we said to people in the industry, which of these best depicts where you work, your office? And this is the top answer, which kind of makes sense to me. That looks like lots of agencies that I've been to. Then we asked industry people another question, which was, where do your friends think you work? Okay. And this is the top answer. I guess which kind of said to us that we think that our friends don't take us that seriously. They don't take our jobs that seriously. They think we're just partying all day long. Okay, I just want to give you a snapshot of someone who works in advertising through our own eyes. So 56% of us think that people in advertising secretly wish they were doing something more creative. In the creative department, that actually went up to 69%. Following on from the partying theme, 40% of us think we drink too much. 39% of people in advertising think we're more likely to suffer from things like anxiety and depression. And actually, amongst 18 to 34-year-olds, that rises to almost half. And we obviously think our industry is pretty tough because 80% think that the advertising industry is a sink or swim environment. But perhaps most worryingly, in many ways, it looks like we think that the best days of our industry are behind us. Because as you can see in this data, 1/4 of people think that the best is yet to come, which on the surface seems like a pretty encouraging stat. But then when you add up the rest of the data, you realize that 70% of people think that the best days of our industry are behind us, which is obviously a pretty worrying state of affairs. So in that context, perhaps it's not surprising that we think we have a talent issue. So 50% of industry folk think we have a problem both attracting and keeping talent. And that stat is even more pronounced amongst management, who I think are feeling that issue most keenly. Okay, so that's a snapshot of how we see ourselves. So how does America see advertising? How does America see the advertising industry? So we went down to Madison Avenue and we posed the same question, which is, what words would you use to describe someone who works in advertising? So brace yourselves.
Creative.
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 They have good imagination, because you have to have good imaginations to make those type of commercials.
Passionate, play hard. Buttoned down.
Observant. Out of the box.
Eccentric.
Outgoing. Talkative and persuasive.
Okay, so pretty different to how we see ourselves. I mean, I have to say, when we went down to Madison Avenue, we thought that consumers would use similar words to us. We thought there would be all of this negativity, but actually, you know, a lot of the words that people used were very positive. And I think part of the story is that advertising is very much seen as an integral part of culture these days. We've heard a lot of talk about culture today. 84% of consumers see advertising as part of the fabric of their everyday lives. I was quite surprised by the fact that 82% of Americans are actually quite comfortable with seeing themselves as a consumer. And then 57% of people say that advertising gives them something to talk about. And amongst 18 to 34-year-olds, that rises to 63%. Okay, so advertising is providing this kind of social capital in the world today. It's very, very much part of culture. I think the other thing that's interesting is that people definitely understand that advertising is more than TV. It's become this very rich and diverse landscape that's everything from a store window display through to brand sponsorship through to a branded board on Pinterest. Okay, so consumers are starting to understand the diversity of what we do in advertising. And I think on a very personal level, actually lots of consumers understand that advertising also makes their lives better. So whether it's the fact that advertising helps you to be more informed in terms of offers and trends, or whether quite simply it entertains you and makes you laugh, I think more and more consumers are becoming aware of that very important benefit, which advertising is fueling the free content that they're consuming. 75% of consumers agree with that, and that's even more pronounced, again, amongst 18 to 34-year-olds who I think truly understand that content equation which is being supported by advertising. So the good news is they don't hate us. 71% of consumers say they feel positive about advertising as a profession. 67% of consumers say they feel positive about the advertising they see around them. They're actually more positive about the advertising they see around them than we are. And actually, 4 in 10 people would go so far as to say that they love advertising. But before we get too carried away, I think it's important that we see advertising in the context of other professions. So we gave consumers a list of professions, and we said, can you just put these in order of the professions that you would most and least like to do? So the good news is that we're ahead of being a banker or a politician or a lumberjack, as we heard earlier. The bad news is that we're in at number 8. So we're behind an attorney, a journalist, a management consultant, a web or software developer, and then in at number 1, an entrepreneur. You know, being an entrepreneur has become such an aspirational profession, particularly for young people. You know, and there is a face of entrepreneurialism in America today, which is incredibly compelling. And I'm not sure we have that face for advertising anymore. Okay, so we had another visual question. We said to people, of all of these individuals, none of them work in advertising, as far as I know. I think they're just from Getty Images. But who is most likely to work in advertising? Okay, so we asked this of the industry, and here are the top 2, okay, which to me makes sense. They look like the kind of characters I see walking around the agency. But then we also asked that question of consumers. So with the same list of people, who is most likely to work in advertising? And here are the top 3. Okay, so really quite different. So I think, you know, it is true to say that consumers think that we are creative. But I think it's quite a corporate version of creativity. I don't think they think of us in a truly creative environment. They think of us sitting around a board table, wearing suits, coming up with ideas and writing them up on a flip chart, which might not be a particularly aspirational version of creativity for young people. We also asked some quite fun questions, and we gave consumers that list of professions, and we said, if you had to choose someone from one profession to trust with your deepest secret, go into business with, help solve a business problem, which profession would you choose? And as you can see, advertising executives didn't actually do that well. Only 1% would trust us with their deepest secrets. 1% would help us to solve a problem. The things that we do best on, 8% would choose us to give them a makeover, and 7% would choose to have sex with us, although, to be honest, that's still not very high. So we think the problem is that people hate us. They don't like us. But I think the real problem is that in many ways as a profession, we don't really register. We certainly don't register as much as we think that we do. So I think really, this research is a story of pride and persecution. And I think one of the themes that came through very strongly in our industry interviews was this notion of insularity. And I think in many ways, insularity is our Achilles heel as an industry. And I'm just going to play for you a film that's really going to, I think, dramatize that point.
The advertising industry is a very inward-facing industry, and we talk to each other about each other all the time.
It was one of the few places to go to be creative. Now there's lots of places to go to be creative and make money.
We are losing great talent to Silicon Valley, for instance.
We're having a challenge to attract those people to our business because of the perception of what our business is.
People just really don't know what goes on behind the scenes within an agency or within the industry.
We need to be brave enough to say we may not know all the answers, and we're going to invite other people to the table and give them a voice so that collectively we kind of move the industry forward.
You know, and I do think that is the truth of our industry. You know, we do spend a lot of time talking to ourselves about ourselves, but you know, how is it that and I think, you know, one of the things that we tend to do is we spend a lot of time drawing lines between agencies and saying, well, this is what you do and this is what we do, whereas in truth, the talent war is being fought elsewhere. 79% of people in the industry think that we're good at selling our clients' businesses, but we're not very good at selling our own. And actually, even more management agree with that statement than with the industry in general. So how is it that we're talking about what we do? I don't know if anyone saw a Tumblr which got passed around a lot at the beginning of this year. It was called Agency Wank. And it essentially showed the way that lots of agencies kind of present themselves to the world. And I don't know if any of you did what I did, which was kind of looked at the Tumblr and thought, yeah, I think I've kind of done some of this in my career. I've used some of this language. You know, I'm not sure I ever talked about the fact that the unicorn symbolizes the never-ending quest for digital mastery. You know, but I certainly have been guilty of using some of that language that we wrap up our business in. And in that context, it's not really surprising that 43% of us say that our parents really have very little idea of what it is we actually do. And then a core theme in our industry responses was also a call for honesty, a call for transparency, you know, asking to bust through some of that bullshit that we've been talking about today. And why are we talking about unicorns when we create jobs? You know, we heard this stat referenced earlier. Advertising fuels 15% of the US jobs market. In the consumer survey, we looked at different facts around advertising, and this was the lever that consumers felt was singularly most compelling when it comes to the role of advertising in America today. You know, and if we pose the question to consumers, overall, do you feel that advertising makes the world better, or does advertising make the world worse? Surprisingly, to me anyway, 72% of consumers say that advertising makes the world better. And I think if we pull the right levers, we can continue to turbocharge that advocacy around advertising. So 87% of consumers think that if people understood the real value that advertising brings, it would change people's perceptions for the better. And no pressure for anyone in the room, but 69% of consumers said that they felt that people who worked in advertising had the power to change the world. And I think the truth is that brand ideas that move people can genuinely move culture. And we see this reflected in lots of data, very high expectations from consumers. 87% think that brands should stand up for what they believe in. 73% say they prefer brands that have a strong identity and clear role in the world. And again, all of these stats are amplified for younger consumers. So this trend is only set to increase in the coming years. Okay, so I think really in summary, what we need to do as an industry is get over our persecution complex and really genuinely take pride in what we do, because there is an awful lot to be proud about. And I just want to play you another film, which is, again, people who work in the industry talking about what they do in very passionate terms and also their hopes for the future.
The best ads make a market. They don't sell. They make a market.
We create jobs far beyond the jobs that are specific to the ones we do in advertising.
We help drive consumption, which helps drive the economy. I also think when we do our job well, we have a positive impact on culture.
Advertising gets people closer to the things that they're passionate about and the things that they love.
We have a lot of fun. It's not a perception, it's a reality.
It's not about talking about something that isn't there. It's about unveiling the goodness that is there and sharing that.
People in advertising change the world. They change the business. They do incredibly cool things, and it's what it makes you come back every day.
My hope is our heyday is still ahead of us. Better be. And I'm looking forward to that.
And I think the most creative advertising actually is very entertaining in addition to being informative.
Because when you see stuff on advertisement, then you go out and you enjoy yourself. Because like without advertisement, like the world would be boring.
So there you go. Without advertising, the world would indeed be boring. So just to summarize what I've talked to you about today, the truth about advertising, there is a disconnection between how the world sees us and how we see ourselves. In the context of other professions, we don't really register in the way that we should. And that's partly because the talent war is being fought elsewhere. We are an insular industry, and sometimes we hide behind a veil of impenetrable language that it's very difficult for people outside of advertising to navigate. But finally, when we get it right, I think we can truly change the world, and that's the message that's coming through loud and clear from consumers.